What if I told you that 3 young men defied the most powerful king in the world and walked into a blazing furnace without fear? What if I told you that their story holds secrets of faith, courage, and divine intervention that many have never heard before? This isn't just another Bible story. It's a powerful testament of unshakable faith in the face of death. Stay tuned as we uncover the shocking details behind the fiery trial of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And if you love deep, biblical truths presented in an engaging way, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a powerful story like this one. The story of the 3 Hebrew boys didn't begin in the fiery furnace. It began in tragedy when Jerusalem fell to the mighty Babylonian Empire. King Nebuchadnezzar ordered his army to besiege the city, destroying everything in their path. But rather than killing everyone, he commanded his officials to take the best and brightest young men, those from royal and noble families, to serve in his palace. Among those taken were Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, 3 young men who were faithful to the Most High God. They were dragged from their homeland, forced into a foreign culture, and stripped of everything familiar. But their biggest battle wasn't just survival, it was the fight for their identity. As soon as they arrived in Babylon, they were given new names: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. This wasn't just a casual renaming, it was a psychological attack. Their original Hebrew names honored Yahweh, the God of Israel. But their new names were tied to Babylonian gods, an attempt to erase their faith and allegiance. Not only that, but they were required to learn the language, customs, and beliefs of their captors. For 3 years, they would be trained in Babylonian wisdom, eating from the king's table and preparing to serve in his court. But this presented a major problem. The food they were given was dedicated to false gods. Right away, they had a choice: compromise or stand firm. Along with their friend Daniel, they made a bold decision. They refused to eat the king's food and instead requested a simple diet of vegetables and water. Many don't realize how risky this was. In Babylon, defying the king's orders often meant death. But God gave them favor, and after 10 days, they looked healthier and stronger than anyone else. Their obedience set the foundation for what was to come. Even though they had been taken from their homeland, they had not been taken from God. Their faith remained unshaken. And soon, that faith would be tested in a way that would shake the entire kingdom of Babylon. Years passed, and Nebuchadnezzar's power grew to unimaginable heights. His empire stretched across nations, and his influence was unmatched. But with great power came great pride. The king wanted more than just control, he wanted worship. One day, he ordered the construction of a massive golden statue, 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide. To put that into perspective, that's as tall as a modern 9-story building, completely covered in gold. This wasn't just a symbol of wealth, it was a declaration of dominance. The statue was placed on the plain of Dura, an open area where it could be seen from miles away. Then came the king's decree. At the sound of the music, every person in the kingdom must bow and worship the golden image. Anyone who refuses will be thrown into a blazing furnace. This was not a suggestion, it was a command backed by the threat of death. Imagine the moment. The music began to play. Harps, lyres, flutes, and every kind of instrument filled the air. As soon as the first notes rang out, thousands upon thousands of people fell to their knees, their faces to the ground, submitting to the king's command. But among the sea of worshippers, 3 men remained standing. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused to bow. They didn't hesitate. They didn't negotiate. They stood tall while everyone around them submitted. Their decision wasn't just an act of defiance against Nebuchadnezzar, it was an act of loyalty to the one true God. This wasn't just about worship. Babylon's gods represented power, control, and compromise. Bowing meant accepting Babylon's rule over their hearts. But they remembered the commandment given to their ancestors. You shall have no other gods before me. No matter the cost, they would obey. However, their stand didn't go unnoticed. Some Chaldeans, likely jealous of their favor in the kingdom, quickly reported them to the king. "O king, did you not command that all must bow to your image? But these Jews refused to obey you." Nebuchadnezzar was furious. How could anyone dare to defy him? How could these 3 captives from a conquered nation stand against his decree? With rage burning in his eyes, he summoned them immediately. They would now stand before the most powerful man in the world, and their answer would determine their fate. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were dragged before King Nebuchadnezzar, their fate hanging in the balance. The king's face twisted in fury as he glared at them. "Is it true?" he demanded. "You refuse to worship my golden image? I will give you one more chance. When the music plays, bow down, and this will all be forgotten. But if you refuse, you will be thrown into the fiery furnace. And what God will be able to rescue you then?" The threat was real. The furnace was no empty warning. It was a brutal execution chamber where the king burned anyone who defied him. The heat alone was enough to kill. But despite the terrifying reality before them, the 3 men did not waver. Without hesitation, they answered, "O king, we do not need to defend ourselves before you. Our God is able to deliver us from the fiery furnace, and he will rescue us from your hand. But even if he does not, we will never serve your gods or worship your golden image." Their words stunned the room. They didn't just declare faith in God's power, they declared faith in his will. Whether they were saved or not, their devotion would not change. This was the kind of faith that shook the foundations of empires. Nebuchadnezzar's face twisted with rage. How dare they challenge him in front of his court? His pride would not allow defiance. He ordered the furnace to be heated 7 times hotter than usual. The very air around it became unbearable, waves of heat distorting the ground. Then he commanded his strongest soldiers to bind the 3 men. There would be no escape, no negotiations, no last-minute pleas. They would be thrown into the fire. As they were led to the furnace, the heat alone killed the soldiers who carried them. But even as they fell into the flames, they did not scream. They did not beg. They did not fight. They fell, fully trusting in the God they served. The crowd gasped, expecting to hear the crackling of burning flesh and the cries of agony. But what happened next was something no one, not even the king himself, could have imagined. The furnace roared with unthinkable heat, and the flames shot up like a living beast, threatening to consume everything in their path. Nebuchadnezzar watched with satisfaction, certain that the punishment of these defiant young men would be a public spectacle, a display of the consequences of rebellion against his authority. But as the smoke rose from the furnace, something impossible happened. Nebuchadnezzar squinted, his eyes narrowing in disbelief. He had been watching the flames closely, expecting to see them burn the 3 men to a crisp. But instead, he saw something shocking, 4 figures walking unharmed inside the fire. "Did we not throw 3 men into the fire?" the king demanded of his advisors, his voice trembling with confusion. They nodded, their eyes glued to the fiery furnace. "But look," Nebuchadnezzar cried out, pointing toward the flames. "I see 4 men walking around freely, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods." It wasn't just that they were alive. They were walking around as if they were in a garden. The fire had not consumed them. There was no smoke, no damage to their clothing, and most incredibly, there was no sign of pain. They were completely untouched. The king was both terrified and awestruck. Who was the fourth figure? What kind of power could protect them in such intense flames? He recognized that this was no ordinary intervention. He had heard of gods and legends, but this was real. This was something greater than any power he had ever known. Was it an angel? A divine presence? Whatever it was, the king had no doubt it was something extraordinary. Nebuchadnezzar wasted no time. He rushed to the mouth of the furnace and shouted for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to come out. "Servants of the Most High God, come out. Come here." As they emerged from the fire, the crowd gasped in awe. Their clothes were not singed. Their hair was not scorched. There wasn't even the faintest smell of smoke on them. Nebuchadnezzar, who had demanded their destruction, now had no choice but to acknowledge the divine power that had saved them. At that moment, the king's attitude completely shifted. The God of Israel had proven himself greater than any earthly king. Nebuchadnezzar declared, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants." The fire that was meant to destroy them had become the very place where God's power and protection were revealed. As Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stood before Nebuchadnezzar, the fire still flickering in the background, the king's words took everyone by surprise. He didn't demand their punishment. He didn't call for their execution. Instead, he offered them something far more remarkable. He offered them promotion. The king, who had been ready to destroy them only moments earlier, now declared in awe, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants." They trusted in him and defied the king's command, and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. With these words, Nebuchadnezzar acknowledged the supremacy of the God of Israel. He was declaring to all of Babylon that there was no power greater than the God these three men served. But this wasn't just a public acknowledgement. The king went a step further. "Therefore, I decree that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be cut into pieces, and their houses be turned into piles of rubble, for no other God can save in this way." It was a moment of miraculous deliverance, not just for the three men, but for the entire empire. The king had seen firsthand that their God was not only powerful, but also sovereign over life and death, able to protect his servants in ways that defied logic. The message was clear. No one, no king, no empire could stand against the God of Israel. But the surprises didn't stop there. As the dust settled and the people of Babylon processed what they had just witnessed, Nebuchadnezzar turned to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He could hardly contain his admiration. "You three have shown extraordinary courage," he said. "Because of your unwavering faith, I will promote you to even higher positions in my kingdom." It wasn't just about surviving the fire. It was about thriving in it. Through their willingness to face death rather than compromise their faith, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were not only spared, they were elevated. They were given authority and honor in the very kingdom that had once sought to destroy them. Their trial had been intense. It had been public, but it had also been the very thing that brought about their promotion. Their faith was tested by fire, and through that fire, they were made stronger. And now, they stood before the king, promoted, honored, and ready to continue their mission of standing firm for the God they knew would never fail them. As the story of these three Hebrew boys echoes through history, it serves as a powerful reminder. Sometimes, God doesn't just deliver us from the fire. He uses the fire to refine us, to elevate us, and to glorify His name. What does this mean for us today? It means that no matter what fire you're facing, God is with you in it. Trials are not meant to destroy you. They are meant to refine you. And sometimes, the fire you fear is the very thing that will bring you into your greatest victory. Are you willing to stand firm in faith, no matter the cost? Are you willing to trust God, even if He doesn't remove the fire? If so, then know this: you are never alone. The same God who stood with them in the flames stands with you now. If this story has inspired you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, God is with you in the fire.